All right, so who are the current top college football coaches? I think there's a clear-cut top 3. After that, I think you could argue a number of like 15 to 20 as far as who should be 4 and 5 in the top 5, but I think there's a clear-cut top 3. We're going to talk about those top 3, and then we'll talk about some of the honorable mentions that might fit in that 4 or 5 spot. And then down in the comment section, let me know your top 5 current college football coaches along with me. Starting off here, number 3, Ryan Day. I think he's definitely in the top 3, no doubt. You could even argue, I think number 2. I would listen to your argument. I could see why he'd be number 2. But just some stats here for him: 0.875 win percentage, 11 plus wins every season. He has been the head coach at Ohio State, minus that 2020 year because they didn't play a full season, and then he won the Natty this year, getting over the hump. Now, he's got to be able to beat Michigan. That's a little gripe there. But if you're an Ohio State fan, you'll definitely take a national championship over that. And as much as some people argue, should he be fired? Not now, but before this, when they lost to Michigan, should he be fired? Now, I think the argument against that is you're one bad hire away from free falling, going into Florida territory, going into Texas territory after they fired Matt Brown. You're one bad hire away always from that happening. And it takes a while to get back to the top. Ryan Day, as the head coach, you're definitely going to be double-digit wins every year. I don't think you're any threat of losing that. You're going to be in the playoff every year. So Ryan Day, top 3 coach for me. He's pretty consistent at getting them to the playoff and then being in the consideration for one of the best teams in the country every year. They're going to be a top 5 team every year in the preseason. I would put them on par with Georgia as far as consistently up there. Similar to like, Alabama was under Saban. Not saying they're winning the Natty every year, but they're definitely up there and they're trending up. So Ryan Day comes in at number 3. Now, number 2, this is going to be kind of controversial maybe to some people. Not to me. I think Dabo has done enough. I think he's consistent enough still, even though it's been a little while since he's won the national championship. Looking at his rosters with Clemson, looking at who they have, they just don't look like they used to when they were winning those national championships, and yet he's still winning. If a bad year for Clemson is 10 wins, you're doing something right. But Dabo Swinney, 0.793 win percentage. He's been in 4 national championships when they had that really good run. It was just them and Clemson them and Alabama every year, excuse me. And he's won 2. Not many people can say that besides the guy that's going to be at number 1. Dabo Swinney gets a lot of crap because he hasn't necessarily adapted to the current landscape of college football with NIL, with the transfer portal. If he can learn how to adapt to the transfer portal and not only re-recruit his guys, but bring in some guys, I think Clemson's going to be okay. They should probably make the playoff again next year. But model of consistency here. And that's kind of one thing with me is guys will have, flash in the pan years, but where they'll be really good 1 or 2 years, but then they won't be able to make it back to that peak. But Clemson, really consistent under Dabo, and not just anybody can win at Clemson. Like, I think a lot of people could win at Ohio State. I don't think just anybody could win at Clemson and do what Dabo's done. He's done a great job there. All right, number 1, clearly Kirby Smart. Now, this year they weren't really the Georgia of old, I would say. Kind of questionable in some things as far as even though they were without Carson Beck in the playoff, the quarterback actually still played pretty good, the backup, and the receivers just couldn't catch. They didn't have a run game. They didn't have weapons. So they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do with that to kind of get back to the Georgia that they have been these past few years, being so dominant, not blowing games they don't need to lose, But Kirby Smart, 0.847 total win percentage, been in 3 national championships, won 2. With Saban gone, I think Kirby Smart's the clear-cut number 1. And I think these are the clear-cut number 3, really. I don't think – now, some people argue Dabo should be out. I don't agree with that just because it's been a while since he's won a national championship. Who else besides these 3 guys has won one? Yeah, and there's not an answer. There's not one. So definitely these 3 guys are the top 3. As far as some honorable mentions you would consider to be that 4 and 5 spot, I think currently if I had to do it, I would probably put Marcus Freeman at number 4 for sure. I think he did a heck of a job in this year's playoff. I think he asserted himself as a top 5 coach in the country. Now, some guys, Sark, Dan Lanning, they've been pretty good, but they haven't made the national championship. With the run Notre Dame went on, despite them losing to Northern Illinois this year, I'll give them a pass for that one. I thought Marcus Freeman outcoached Kirby Smart number one, which is pretty impressive. That's pretty hard to do. Then I thought he outcoached James Franklin. I thought they definitely were not as talented as Georgia or Penn State, and yet they still won and made the Natty. So Marcus Freeman right now for me is at number 4. Steve Sarkisian at Texas, I wouldn't put him at number 5. I kind of question how good of a coach Steve Sarkisian is. He can get the talent in, which is half the battle as a coach, so you got to give him props to that. But as far as on-field stuff, some really questionable stuff. There's no reason really these last 2 years, I think Texas should have been in the national championship. They're definitely talented enough. He's going to have a talent-filled roster, but on-field stuff, he makes some questionable decisions. Look at Ohio State this year and kind of cost them the game. James Franklin, same thing. Penn State was way more talented than Notre Dame. They should have beat Notre Dame in that game, made the national championship, and he's consistent. James Franklin has done this a lot longer as far as consistency than Steve Sarkisian has. So Sark, if he can keep it rolling a few years, he'll move up probably in the top 10 for sure. But hasn't been quite consistent enough for me yet, backtracking to USC, Washington. So if he can get it on track to where he's making the semifinal every year, he'll definitely be a top 5 coach. But eventually I want to see him get over the hump. James Franklin, same thing. Franklin at Penn State, they can beat everybody but Ohio State and Michigan. So they got to get that fixed. Next year, they're going to be loaded. They've got a lot of guys coming back. They should be in the semifinals again, probably, if they get the right draw. See if they can get over the hump next year. Dan Lanning, Oregon, I think anybody can win there, so I haven't been too impressed with what Dan Lanning has done. Yeah, it's impressive they won the Big Ten this year, but still, come playoff time, they crapped the bed and got just whooped by Ohio State. So I was impressed with what he did in the Big Ten. Definitely got my attention going undefeated this year. But, again, playoff time, that's what really matters, and they couldn't do anything. Brian Kelly, been pretty consistent at Notre Dame and at LSU. We'll see if he wins one. The past, 3 coaches that LSU has hired has won, or I think 4, actually. The last 4 coaches LSU has had, I think, might be 3, have won national championships. So we'll see if Brian Kelly can join them. Josh Huepel, he actually would be in my top 5 right now. Huepel at Tennessee. He's kind of gotten them back on the map. He's pretty consistent. So Huepel might be number 5 for me, actually. Curt Cignetti, Indiana, definitely trending up. He's won big at James Madison. He's won big at Indiana, and we'll see if he can keep it rolling in Indiana. All right, then some other names here that aren't necessarily in that conversation, minus a couple of these, but some names of note. Kirk Feretnz, Iowa, really consistent at Iowa, done a pretty good job. Not an easy place to win. Jeff Brohm, I think he's trending up. He's won at Purdue. He's won at NC State. Not NC State. Won at Louisville. And I think Louisville's going to be a consistent top 25 team under Jeff Brohm. So I think he'll definitely move up. John Sumrall, Tulane. He's won at Troy. Now he's won at Tulane. So he's done a good job. Jamey Chadwell, same thing at Liberty and Coastal Carolina. Lane Kiffin. He's kind of like Sark level to me. He does a pretty good job. Now, Sark I would put above Kiffin because he's at least making the semis. Lane Kiffin's not making the playoffs. Really talented roster. Really good job of getting talent in there. But in game, some questionable stuff as far as getting over the hump. Lincoln Riley, kind of free falling right now. He had those really good wins, really good years at Oklahoma. But since he's got the USC, kind of been free falling, not looking too good these past couple of years. And then Kalen deboer at Alabama. Similar situation as far as go back to last year, Washington, he makes the national championship, does a good job there. And Alabama, we'll see. I think he'll be fine. He's a pretty good coach, but taking the reins after Saban's tough. And they kind of had some questionable bonehead stuff at Alabama this year. I thought they should have been a lot better than they were. So that's why he's kind of an honorable mention here. But those are my top 3. I think there's a clear-cut top 3. But I want to know your top 5. So are those 3 in your top 3 that I had? Ryan Day, Dabo, and Kirby. And then who are number 4 and number 5? Who would you put on that list? I'd probably put, like I said, Josh Huepel and Marcus Freeman, I guess, right now is who's coming to mind for me. But who would be your top 5 active college football coaches? Let me know. Comment down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe.